what's going on in the U.S. Of course, the U.S. is the world's largest economy. The U.S. dollar is the world's largest reserve currency. So what happens here doesn't stay here. And we're heading for a very severe recession. I just want to kind of explain briefly the dynamics of that. So the Fed's raising interest rates. We know that they started, so it wasn't that long ago, but March 1st, 2022, the Fed policy rate was zero. It was 0%. Today, it's 4.5%. So that's 4.5% in about 8 or 9 months. People remember Paul Volcker. Oh, Paul Volcker raised interest rates to 20%. Well, he did, but so far Powell hasn't raised them as high. Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed, hasn't raised them as high, but he's raised them fast. I mean, even when Volcker was working his way to 20%, it took 3 years, from 1979 to 1982, and Jay Powell has done this in, like I say, eight or 9 months. So that's a very rapid, very steep path. They started with baby steps, 25 basis points last March, and then 50 basis points following that, but then 4 hikes in a row, 75 basis points each. And the most recent one, just a few days ago, got us up to 4.5%. So what's going on? So Powell's plan is clear because he's told us 5 times. He's starting to worry that no one's listening, but he gave speeches and he said the same thing all 5 times. He said inflation is job one. It's not that we don't care, but unemployment is going to go up. We're going to have a recession. He doesn't use the R word, by the way, but it's implicit in everything he says. We are going to have a recession. Unemployment is going up. And too bad. It's kind of too bad because we got to get inflation under control. And they have what they call the DOTS, silly name, but the members of the Board of Governors and the Federal Reserve Bank presidents give estimates, or their estimates of unemployment, inflation, growth, and interest rates for the next 3 years, and they put them as dots on a chart, so they call it the dots. And then Wall Street gets the dots. They do a central tendency and regressions and all this stuff. By the way, one of the top Fed insiders, like practically sits in Jay Powell's lap, and has all the way back to Bernanke and Yellen, told me personally. He said, the inside the Fed, they regard the dots as a joke. They're not better than guesses. Their forecasting ability is dismal. You or I would have better forecasts, and they wish they could get out of it, but they don't know how. So that's the truth. But the problem is Wall Street and the financial media and the talking heads on CNBC, they want to talk about the dots, and it does affect market behavior. So even though it's a joke, even though the forecasts are terrible, you have to pay attention because it affects the markets. And if you're affecting the markets, you're on the wrong side, you're going to get run over. So I look at the dots not because I put weight on them as predictive analytic tools, but because the market pays attention, so we have to pay attention. Inflation is still high, too high. I buy gas and shop for groceries just like everybody else, so it's still too high. But it has come down from 9.1% to 7.1% in the last 5 months. And so the market says, hey, you did it. You're already there. Inflation is coming down. Why don't you stop? And by the way, you're going to get the memo, maybe in February or sometime soon, you're going to get the message. The economy is going to be slowing down. Inflation is going to be coming down. You're going to hit the pause button early, meaning maybe as early as February. And then you're going to cut rates. This is the famous pivot. Whenever you hear of the Fed pivot, that's when the Fed turns around and starts cutting rates instead of raising them. And that'll be just in time, and growth will slow, but it won't be too bad. And we'll come in for a soft landing. And this is the Goldilocks scenario. So again, typical Wall Street, get the pom-poms out. The Fed's going to cut rates by March, and so buy stocks. That's all Wall Street knows, is buy stocks. So that's Wall Street's version. So there's the Powell plan and then Wall Street's version. Here's the reality. There is a chance that we are already at the terminal rate. But the conundrum is inflation coming down because the Fed is still hiking, or is the inflation coming down because they're at the terminal rate? Well, we don't know. It's kind of hard to sort those things out. Powell would say, yeah, it's coming down. I know that, of course, but it's because I'm hiking and I'm going to keep doing it. My view is, no, you actually did it. It's mission accomplished. You just don't know it. You're fighting. You're like the Japanese in the caves fighting 4 years after the end of World War II. I mean, you're still raising rates, and you already got to where you want to go. That means, as usual, they're going to screw it up. They're going to blunder. They're going to go too far. And it's not going to be a mild recession. It's not going to be Goldilocks. In this version, Goldilocks gets eaten by the bears. In other words, you're going to throw this economy into a very deep recession because you're going to go too far, as usual. And you're not going to know it until too late. By the time you realize it's mission accomplished, you will have gone too far, too long. Rates are going to be too high. And it's not going to be a soft landing. I give a pretty tough analysis. I don't consider myself a doom and gloom person. I get called that all the time, but I'm actually a very optimistic person. But I'm also a realistic person and an analyst, and I don't think you serve listeners or readers or viewers very well if you don't kind of tell it like it is. So we deliver it straight. But I also offer solutions because I think that's kind of your obligation. A couple of things would be obvious from this. Number one, reduce your exposure to equities. If Wall Street's talking up the stock market based on the soft landing Goldilocks scenario, but Powell's going to stick to his guns and raise rates too high, that's going to cause stocks to crash very severely, very suddenly. If the market were adjusting, say, yeah, Powell means it, he's going to keep it, and we ought to come down a little bit, that would be one thing, but that's not what's happening. The market's trying to rally. Powell's warning people what's going to happen. They're not listening, and it is going to happen. So markets will crash. So lighten up your equity exposure. I'm not saying sell every single stock. There's room for a slice of stocks. I would, for the stock portion of your portfolio, I would look at energy, like, companies like, the obvious names, Chevron, BP, ExxonMobil, Marathon, because they have refining capacity. We're not getting away from oil and natural gas, in my lifetime, probably not in this century. The whole, I got nothing against solar power and windmills, but if you think you can run a modern power grid on that, you know nothing about physics, you know nothing about the baseline power needed to maintain a power grid. You know nothing about the chemicals needed to make batteries for electric vehicles. There's not enough lithium in the world to make more than a small fraction of all the batteries they say they're going to have. Not to mention the fact you use up more energy mining the minerals, the cobalt, the lithium, the copper, and the nickel you need for the batteries than you save having the batteries themselves. They wear out after 8 years. And how much energy and water do you use to do the mining to get the lithium to make the batteries, and why is that good for the environment? So none of it makes sense. It's an ideological crusade by a bunch of elite eggheads who have a hidden agenda, which is about transferring wealth from the northern to southern hemispheres. So you have to see through this, what I call the green news scam. So that means that oil and natural gas have been so beaten down by the Larry Finks of the world that, but we're going to need them. There's no substitute. Those are really good stocks to buy. So I would lighten up on equities overall, but to the extent I had an equity slice, I would look at the energy sector. And by the way, unemployment is a lagging indicator. People go, well, there's no recession because unemployment is not going up enough. No, unemployment is a lagging indicator. When you're in financial distress, you cut all your costs, you turn out the lights, you do a lot of things first. The last thing you want to do is lay people off. So, but when things get bad enough and you start laying people off, of course, that's hard for those individuals, but you're already in the recession at that point. That's not a leading indicator. That's a lagging indicator. The leading indicators say the recession is definitely coming. So, but yeah, unemployment is going to go up a lot.